I want to thank you, Alphonse, to have invited me, and I hope that you forgive me if I'm too aggressive or too provocative. Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, this is a privilege for our group at Laval University to present you the fruit of our work initiated 25 years ago in the field of bariatric surgery. Bilopancreatic diversion is a perfect operation for patients with a BMI over 50 and probably the best for any BMI over 35. We have no disclosure in relation to this presentation. Oh, no. C'est pas le bon. Oh.
This one?
No.
Is it?
No.
Is this one?
Right.
Could you just follow through the slides and bring someone up, please?
Oh.
Next slide. Just ask for the next slide.
Okay. In this presentation, we will demonstrate that bilopancreatic diversion targets the cause of a tricky hormonal system, which creates a severe disease. Bilopancreatic diversion provokes changes that are going to last on a long-term basis. Next slide, please. Our choice of operation follow our understanding of morbid obesity. Morbid obesity is not due to gluttony. Numerous studies using a 3-day diet journal have shown a similar mean daily caloric intake between groups of normal weight, overweight, and morbid obese patients. Next slide. Numerous physiological mechanisms are involved in morbid obesity. First, have a look at the weight maintenance system. Next slide. The weight maintenance system is a reality. It is efficient in managing 1 million kilocalories a year. It has a precision at 0.1%. It is automatic and working day and night. It is inborn but greatly variable between individuals. Weight maintenance requires energy balance. Next slide. The precision need for energy balance cannot be the result of a fully aware process, and it is in fact from 90 to 95% automatic, counting on non-exercise process as diet-induced thermogenesis. Next slide. Expenditure varies greatly with food intake. The more we eat, the more our temperature rises and greater the heat loss. Even the days when I have the opportunity to play tennis, I spend almost more calories while eating than playing. Next slide. Thermogenesis is impaired in obese patients. Their capacity to produce heat has been shown to be half normal, that's the left graph, and that condition gets worse while fasting. The obese doesn't have the negative balance like the lean. Next slide. Insulin is an important regulator of thermogenesis, but they are high and low responders. Insulin acts by stimulating the autonomous system and increasing adrenaline and neurohormones, and by increasing non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and it burns calories. Next slide. The production of intestinal hormone is impaired in morbid obesity. The GIP signal built reserve prevail over the signal of GLP-1, plenty of food. Next slide. The basic mechanism of BPD, change intestinal hormone and reset the weight maintenance system. Next slide. After bilopancreatic diversion, as shown on those graphs, at time of fastening, upper left, or postprandial, lower right, GIP, built reserve signal, is decreased, while GNP1, plenty of food signal, is increased. Next slide. Dose modification after BPD improve insulin metabolism, which, as said earlier, markedly improve in morbidly obese patients. This improvement is real while fasting. Next slide. Dose effect lasts and resting energy expenditure remains over fat-free mass, stay increased 1 year following Bilopancreatic diversion. Next slide. While decreased expenditure is observed after dieting, an increased expenditure is observed after Bilopancreatic diversion. Next slide. In this slide, we see that 3 years after BPD, high expenditure persists. Next slide. Long-term metabolic effect make Bilopancreatic diversion better in all those domains. First one, weight loss, to the 10th one, the potential of indication for surgery in less obese but metabolically sick patient. Next slide. 5 years after surgery, mean percent initial excess weight loss is better with BPD than bending or gastric bypass. And this while mean BMI were higher in BPD patient. Next slide. At 15 years, our BPD dual switch patient still benefit of a 39% total body weight loss. And to be more precise, at 15 years of follow-up, the mean percentage of initial excess weight loss is over 83%. Next slide. From the previous over 2,400 patients, there were 1,259 patients with a BMI over 50. All of them have a follow-up longer than 17 months, and the percentage of their initial total body loss is 41.8%, which means over 80% of initial excess weight loss. Next slide. In terms of patient satisfaction, the remaining BMI is very important regardless of their pre-op BMI. But as shown here, the expectation seems to be different between patients under 50 or over 50 of BMI. Next slide. Dr. Buchwald's meta-analysis showed that improvement in comorbidities is much better after BPD than after gastric banding, and also better than after gastric bypass. Next slide. This is our own series as far as the prevalence of some comorbidities is correct and the cure rate obtained after surgery. 96% for diabetes and 98% for dyslipidemia. Next slide. As stated earlier, we consider as a handicap the fact to give up the pleasure of eating normally. Here, we see caloric intake 1 year after surgery, according to 13 series available in the literature. Average Bilopancreatic diversion daily intake looked like yours and mine, being around 2,500 calories. Next slide. Risk-benefit ratio is in favor of BPD when mortality, operative complication, percentage of success, and reoperation rate are taken into account. Next slide. Side effects are rarely discussed after restrictive procedure because success relies on side effect. While gastric bypass patients suffer of a 60% vomiting, Note there are no series about bending on this subject. After BPDDS, all side effects displayed here can be avoided. Next slide. Talking about side effects, patients, surgeon, and allied health often mention bloating or bacterial overgrowth following BPD. But what is not mentioned is the fact that most of the time, those side effects can disappear when patient goes back to some basic principle. Next slide. As far as long-term is concerned, both gastric bypass and BPD have a better survival rate than non-operated patients. Reoperation rate is much smaller after BPDDS. Next slide. After any bariatric surgery, good follow-up is essential. After BPD, the risk of deficiency is real, but the margin of safety is wide. Deficiencies are rare and correctable. 25 years of experience give no sign of latent danger. The 21% inadequacy with vitamin D has to be placed in perspective. Next slide. Data available in normal population have shown up to 36% inadequacy, while non-operated morbidly obese patients reach 60% inadequacy with vitamin D. This is the same level than after a BPD with a 50 centimeter common limb. Next slide. Nutritional deficiencies are rare and manageable with dietary counseling. Need for surgical revision is very rare. Bacterial overgrowth almost always responds to metronidazole. Next slide. BPD makes pregnancy easier and more secure. We can see complication goes down to 0. That isn't the case after gastric banding, as published by Dixon. Next slide. BPD normalized birth weight. Again, this isn't the case post-gastric banding, as published by Dixon. Next slide. Our more recent follow-up of children born after there's mother BPD taught us that the prevalence of obesity at adolescence is reduced by 50%. Next slide. While it has been suggested that BPD should be reserved for heavier patients, experience show that BPD with dural switch is even more efficient in less obese patients. Next slide. For all of these reasons, we recommend that Bilopancreatic diversion with dural switch should be the standard operation for all patients with morbid obesity. We also preview a great future for dural switch in the treatment of type 2 diabetes mellitus and dyslipidemia, even in the absence of severe obesity. Thank you for your attention.